In the neon-soaked corridors of Banana Island, Zaram thought she had found a love that couldn't be bought. She was a titan of FinTech, but to her husband, Kamsiyochukwu, she wasn't a soulmate. She was a high-limit ATM with a heartbeat. Now, the bank is closed, the audit is final, and in the world of Nigerian luxury, revenge is the only currency that still matters. The sun did not set over Lagos. It surrendered to the neon defiance of the city. In a penthouse in Banana Island that smelled of expensive wood and calculated silence, Zaram stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was the oil queen, the first daughter of a silent billionaire from Anambra, but she had built her own empire in FinTech through grit and a ruthless understanding of the algorithm. Her skin was the color of roasted cocoa beans, polished to a high-definition, ultra 3D sheen that caught every stray ray of the dying sun. In this hyper-real world, every detail was exaggerated for the senses. The condensation on her crystal glass of vintage champagne looked like liquid diamonds, and her silk robe flowed around her ankles like spilled mercury. Outside, the Atlantic Ocean churned, a deep indigo canvas that looked like a heavy oil painting, thick with texture and mystery. Then he entered, Kamsiyochukwu. He didn't just walk, he moved with the grace of a predatory cat, his presence filling the room like a masterstroke on a canvas. He was an architect, or so the profile he had carefully curated suggested. He had a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that promised a lifetime of the kind of devotion usually reserved for goddesses. When he wrapped his arms around Zaram from behind, she felt the warmth of his chest through her silk robe, a heat she mistook for passion. "You are working too hard, mommy," Kamsiyochukwu whispered, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that vibrated through her spine. "The world can wait for its digital tokens. My heart cannot wait for its queen." Zaram leaned back into him, closing her eyes. She was a titan in the boardroom, a woman who could sniff out a bad investment from across the Niger, but in the presence of Kamsiyochukwu, her defenses were rendered in soft focus. She didn't see the way his eyes darted to her MacBook, the one currently processing a multi-billion naira merger. She didn't notice the slight, hungry twitch in his jaw when she mentioned that her father's new offshore trust had finally been ratified. "I just want us to have everything, Kamsi," turning in his arms. "We already have everything," he lied, his face a masterpiece of sincerity. He tilted her chin up. In the ultra 3D light, the micro-expressions of his face were flawlessly deceptive. "The house in Ikoyi, the firm, the legacy. I don't want your money, Zaram. I want your time. I want your peace." It was the perfect script. He knew that for a woman who had spent her life being chased for her inheritance, the ultimate aphrodisiac was a man who pretended to be unimpressed by it. Later that evening, they dined on the terrace. The table was set with porcelain so fine it was translucent, and the food, a fusion of traditional Igbo delicacies and French haute cuisine, looked like a colorful oil painting. Kamsiyochukwu poured the wine, his hand steady. "I finalized the plans for the wedding," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. "I know you wanted something small, but a queen deserves a coronation. I've spoken to the event planners. We are bringing in flowers from the Netherlands and a chef from Tuscany. But..." He paused, his expression turning somber. "The costs are spiraling. My fund's capital is tied up in the Eco Atlantic project. I might have to scale back the vision I had for you." Zaram reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "Don't be silly, Kamsi. What is money between us? I'll have my personal assistant transfer the balance to the vendors tomorrow. I want the world to see how much I love you." Kamsiyochukwu looked down at his plate to hide the predatory gleam in his eyes. The hook was set. To Zaram, this was the beginning of a fairy tale written in the stars of the Lagos sky. To Kamsiyochukwu, Zaram was not a woman. She was a high-limit, walking, talking ATM machine with a beautiful face and a gullible heart. He wasn't marrying a woman. He was acquiring a lifestyle. As the digital clock on the wall flickered to midnight, the city of Lagos hummed below them, a city of millions of dreams and one very expensive nightmare. The wedding was not merely a ceremony, it was a cinematic invasion of the senses, a masterpiece of excess that looked like a Renaissance oil painting brought to life with 4K resolution. The colors were dangerously saturated, deep, pulsing emeralds, royal purples that felt heavy to the eye, and the blinding metallic gold of Zaram's traditional George fabric. Every inch of the Eco Hotel Grand Ballroom had been transformed into a tropical cathedral of wealth. Zaram was a vision of ultra 3D perfection. Her gown, a fusion of ivory lace and hand-stitched coral beads, weighed nearly 20 kilograms, yet she moved with the ethereal lightness of a spirit. Her makeup was airbrushed to a flawless matte finish, making her look like a porcelain deity carved by the gods of the Niger. Beside her, Kamsiyochukwu was the quintessential Odogu. He wore a cream-colored agbada embroidered with gold thread that caught the light every time he moved, his smile radiant enough to mask the cold, calculating machinery of his mind. The air was thick with the scent of 5,000 imported lilies and the smoky, rich aroma of party jollof rice prepared by the most expensive caterers in West Africa. High-life beats thundered through the hall, the bass vibrating in the floorboards as the elite of Lagos, men in starched white tunics and women in headgears that defied gravity, sprayed crisp bundles of naira and dollars. "You look like a dream I never want to wake up from," Kamsiyochukwu whispered into her ear as they swayed to a soulful Igbo love song. "I'm finally home," Zaram replied, her head resting on his shoulder. She didn't see him signal to a man in the corner, his cousin from the village, who was actually a disgraced accountant Kamsi used to forge bank signatures. The deception moved from the ballroom to the Maldives for their honeymoon. They stayed in a private villa over the turquoise water, a setting so beautiful it looked like a digital render. The water was a crystalline blue and the sand was as white as crushed pearls. But while Zaram was in the outdoor rain shower, the steam creating a soft focused glow around her silhouette, Kamsiyochukwu was at the mahogany desk. He wasn't booking a sunset cruise. His fingers moved with frantic precision across his phone screen. He was authorizing emergency transfers from their newly opened joint account, an account Zaram had seeded with 500 million naira as their beginning of forever fund. "Kamsi?" Zaram's voice floated from the bathroom. "Why is my phone blowing up with security alerts? The offshore server is flagging multiple high-volume withdrawals." Kamsiyochukwu didn't flinch. He deleted the browser history and turned just as she emerged, wrapped in a plush white robe, her hair damp and smelling of jasmine. He didn't look like a thief. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. He slumped his shoulders, a single practiced tear shimmering in the corner of his eye, a detail rendered perfectly in the sharp sunlight of the island. "My love," he choked out, his voice thick with rehearsed shame. "I didn't want to ruin this moment. I didn't want to tell you." Zaram ran to his side, her heart tightening. "Tell me what? Is someone hurt?" "My architectural firm, the Eco Atlantic project," he lied, his hands trembling slightly. "The main contractor fled with the payroll. 500 workers, Zaram, families who won't eat this month. They were going to sue, to ruin my reputation before I even began our life together. I used a bit of our us money to settle the emergency. I knew your golden heart would understand. I'll replace it as soon as my bridge loan clears." He buried his face in her neck, sobbing silently. Zaram felt a wave of maternal protectiveness. She felt powerful being the one to save her husband's honor. "Oh, Kamsi, why didn't you just say so? It's just money. We have plenty of it. Don't cry, my king. Your reputation is my reputation." She held him, stroking his head, completely unaware that at that very moment, the payroll he spoke of was actually a wire transfer to a sports betting account in Macau and a down payment on a luxury apartment in Dubai for a woman he called his real wife. The paint was thick, the colors were rich, but underneath the beautiful oil painting of their marriage, the canvas was rotting. The ATM was open, and Kamsiyochukwu intended to drain it until the screen went black. 3 months into the marriage, the ATM started to decline transactions, but not because the funds were exhausted. Zaram sat in her home office in their Lekki mansion, the lighting dim and moody, reminiscent of a Caravaggio painting where the shadows tell more than the light. The room was a fortress of glass and steel, an ultra 3D environment where her multiple monitors cast a cool, blue glow against the warm oil-painted textures of the mahogany walls. She had noticed a pattern, not in the money, but in the silence. Kamsiyochukwu was no longer the attentive cat. He had become a ghost. He was always at site meetings that lasted until 3 a.m., and his phone, once an open book, was now guarded like a state secret. But Zaram was not just a rich girl. She was a FinTech architect. She had built systems that detected fraud in milliseconds. She began her own audit. Using a mirrored server she had quietly installed in the house's smart system, she watched his digital footprint. The results were a jagged, ugly smear across the beautiful canvas of her life. Kamsiyochukwu wasn't an architect. He was a professional husband hunter, a man who targeted high net worth women across West Africa. She found a hidden folder in his cloud storage labeled Projects. It wasn't blueprints of buildings, but dossiers on women. There she was, labeled Project Goldmine. Beside her was a woman in Enugu labeled Project Backup, and another in Accra labeled Project Exit Strategy. The most devastating blow came in the form of a video file. It was Kamsiyochukwu recorded just 2 weeks ago in a luxury hotel suite she had paid for. He was laughing, popping a bottle of Ace of Spades, and bragging to a friend. His voice rang out in high-fidelity audio, cruel and mocking. "He's in love with my routing number. She's not a wife, she's a jackpot. Once the last trust fund clears, I'm out. Let her keep the memories. I'm keeping the billions." Zaram didn't cry. The 3D world around her seemed to sharpen, the colors losing their warmth and becoming cold, metallic, and precise. She felt a strange, vibrating calm, the kind of stillness that precedes a hurricane. She spent the next 48 hours in her office. To the outside world, she was the morning wife of a busy man. In reality, she was a predator. She didn't just want to divorce him, she wanted to delete him. She initiated Protocol Obidimba. She didn't block his access to the accounts. That would be too simple. Instead, she created a digital mirage. She fed his banking app false data, making it appear that a massive 2 billion naira dividend had just hit their joint account. She watched through the hidden security feed in the living room as Kamsiyochukwu saw the fake notification. His reaction was rendered in grotesque detail. His eyes widened, his breath hitched, and a slow, predatory grin spread across his face. He immediately began typing, attempting to move the funds to his private offshore account in the Cayman Islands. But what he didn't know was that every transfer he authorized was actually a digital signature on a confession. She had rerouted the transaction through a legal compliance software she had designed, which flagged the movement of funds as unauthorized embezzlement and sent a real-time report to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. She also found his real wife, a woman named Ifeanyi, in a modest house in Enugu, who had been told Kamsi was working offshore to provide for their 3 children. Zaram didn't see an enemy. She saw another victim of the same con artist. Zaram picked up her phone and made one call. "Ifeanyi, this is Zaram. I think we have a common problem, and I have a very expensive solution." As the sun rose over the Lagos Lagoon, turning the water into a shimmering sheet of beaten gold, Zaram closed her laptop. The trap was set. The ATM was about to give Kamsiyochukwu a payout he would never forget. The final act played out in the heart of Ikoyi, at a private gala Zaram had organized to celebrate their 6-month anniversary. The setting was a hyper-stylized dreamscape. The garden was draped in thousands of fairy lights that looked like falling stars in 3D, and the guests were the cream of Lagos society. Waiters moved like clockwork, serving appetizers that looked like miniature oil paintings on crackers. Kamsiyochukwu was at his peak. He walked through the crowd with the swagger of a man who believed he had just successfully stolen 2 billion naira. He sipped a 30-year-old whiskey, his eyes scanning the room for his next investment, while Zaram watched him from the balcony, her silhouette framed by the moon like a vengeful goddess in a dark masterpiece. "Attention, everyone." Zaram's voice cut through the high-life music, amplified by a sound system so crisp it felt like she was whispering in everyone's ear simultaneously. The music faded. The 3D mapped projections on the walls of the mansion shifted from floral patterns to a stark, cold white. Kamsiyochukwu looked up, his smile faltering as he saw the expression on Zaram's face. She wasn't wearing her usual look of adoration. She looked like iron. "Tonight is about transparency," Zaram said, her eyes locked onto his. "My husband, Kamsiyochukwu, has often spoken about building legacies. I thought it was time we shared his latest project with all of you." With a flick of her wrist on her tablet, the giant screens behind her erupted into life. It wasn't a slideshow of their wedding. It was the video of him in the hotel suite, his voice booming through the garden. "She is not a wife, she is a jackpot." The collective gasp from the crowd sounded like a windstorm. Kamsiyochukwu's face turned a sickly shade of grey, the oil painting perfection of his skin cracking under the high-definition glare of his own betrayal. And since Kamsi loves joint ventures so much, I'd like to introduce his most long-standing partner. From the side of the stage stepped Ifeanyi, the woman from Enugu, dressed in the same expensive lace Zaram had sent her. Behind her stood 3 children, the eldest boy looking exactly like a younger, innocent version of Kamsiyochukwu. The silence that followed was heavy, textured, and suffocating. Kamsiyochukwu dropped his glass. The sound of it shattering on the marble was captured in slow motion by the overhead drones, the shards flying like liquid diamonds. Zaram, wait, this is a misunderstanding. It's deepfake technology. Kamsiyochukwu scrambled, his voice cracking. He reached for his phone, likely trying to check his Cayman account for the 2 billion naira that would be his escape hatch. Don't bother, Zaram said, stepping down the stairs, her heels clicking with the rhythm of a ticking clock. The money you thought you moved tonight, it never went to the Caymans. It went to a trust fund for Ifeyua and your children, and the digital signature you used to move it, that was a formal admission of fraud and bigamy sent directly to the EFCC. As if on cue, the heavy iron gates of the mansion swung open. 4 black SUVs roared into the driveway, their sirens painting the garden in strobes of red and blue. Officers in tactical vests, their features sharp and unforgiving in the 3D light, stepped out. Kamsiyochukwu tried to run toward the back fence, but he was trapped in the very luxury he had manipulated. The high walls and security sensors he had once praised were now his cage. The police tackled him onto the manicured grass, the Odogu of Lagos being pinned down in the mud, his cream-colored agbada stained and ruined. As they led him away in handcuffs, his face pressed against the window of the police cruiser, Zaram stood at the edge of the driveway. She didn't look happy, but she looked whole. The ultra 3D world around her began to soften, the harsh neon fading into a natural, beautiful sunrise. Ifeyua walked up to her, the 2 women sharing a silent nod of survival. The ATM was closed, the account was settled, and for the first time in months, Zaram's heart was no longer a transaction, it was hers again. The story of the oil queen and the ghost architect would be whispered in the clubs of Victoria Island for years, not as a romance, but as a warning. In the new Africa, the women aren't just the prize, they are the architects of their own justice.